Uh, just a little introduction for our guest speaker for this morning. Okay, our guest speaker for lecture input today is Architect Chok Leong Hoi, which is
Good morning.
Morning, Mr. Chok. Which is a
Morning.
director for Atria Architects Sendirian Berhad, and it is based in Johor Bahru lah. All right. So, Architect Chok graduated from National University in Singapore in 1991 and has diverse working experience in Singapore until his return to Johor in 2006. Is it correct, Architect Chok?
Very accurate.
Where he involved in several major projects. One of the notable projects he was involved in was Setia Sky 88 in Johor Bahru, which was completed in 2017. And currently, there are several other ongoing projects that he involved in, such as Setia Eco Garden, Setia Eco Cascadia, Eco World, Eco Tropics, and many more lah. All right. So for the topic of our lecture input today is evolution of housing development in Malaysia after independence. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Architect Chok Leong Hoi for the input lecture. Please welcome Architect Chok, and you may take the room now. Okay, you may share the slide now.
All right. Thank you very much,
Okay.
Dr. Zid. Thanks a lot for inviting me for this, or rather sharing some experience about housing in Malaysia, especially on this topic about evolution of housing development in Malaysia after independence. I would like to start sharing my slide. Okay. Okay. I hope you all can see the slide, right? Any
Yes, we
problem?
can see Architect Chok. No problem.
Okay.
Everything is
Good.
clear.
Good. Okay, I will start from here. Now, yes, we often chance upon the term housing and housing development here and there in the construction industry, which we always think are referring to the same meaning. That is to build a place to live. But in fact, legally, there are subtly differences between the two terms. Okay, according to dictionary, the term housing refers to the construction and the usage of houses or building collectively for the purpose of sheltering people. But on the other hand, the term housing development is used to describe an effort that is not just fulfilling our basic needs, but also a political and commercial act of building houses to ensure a certain population is given the basic shelter to live or to sell them to gain profit for the builders themselves. So it's very important to understand under the Housing Development Act 1966 because it defines what housing development is. As it says, it is to develop or construct or cause to be constructed in any manners whatsoever more than 4 units of housing accommodation and includes the collection of money or the carrying on of any building operations for the purpose of erecting housing accommodation in, on, over, or under any land, or the sale of more than 4 lots of land or building lots with the view of constructing more than 4 units of housing accommodation. So I hope you can see the difference between the two terms. As professional architects, we will have to comprehend what it really means as housing development as compared to the very general term as housing. So in short, building a house to stay, like our ancestor, doesn't really consider as housing development as mentioned in the said act. I hope that's clear to you. Okay, the two main players for housing development in Malaysia are, firstly, the Malaysian government, and followed by the private developers. The government focus on the public housing, like those affordable low-cost houses, as well as those flats, while the developers zoom into the more luxurious private housing for the intention to gain maximum profit, like terrace houses, semi-D, high-rise apartment, and condominiums. Now, the housing activities in Malaysia that we see today has gone through an evolution and transformation over the years since the turn of last century, and the pace has quickened since independence in the late 1950s. We can quite certainly say that we can only find traditional Malay houses and indigenous timber houses, like what you can see in the slide, before the arrival of the colonial powers. Through the colonization by the Western powers and the so-called modernization since the 18th centuries, and at the late 19th centuries, the British has also brought in multiracial immigrants into Malaya, mainly the Chinese and Indians. So this phenomenon has brought a great impact on Malaysian socio-economic landscape, as well as the housing development. From the basic traditional Malay kampong houses and the indigenous timber houses found prior to the colonization period, other new kinds of houses are found in the new human settlements, mainly on the west coast of the peninsula, where mining and commercial plantations were carried out. These were simple, single-story timber houses with thatched roof and dirt floor that the new immigrants built for themselves as well as for their close relatives who come to join them. A similar type of timber houses, mainly in the form of freestanding or rather rows of link houses, also start to appear in larger plantation as workers' quarters. Whereas in the urban areas, the shop houses, link house, and townhouses starts to appear much earlier in the oldest urban center like Penang, Malacca, and Singapore, mainly occupied by the merchants. They were later adopted in other new urban centers like Kuala Lumpur, Ipoh, Johor Bahru that spring up after the 1920s. These are more solidly built structure, sometimes half masonry, half timber, or totally masonry structure, mostly in the straight eclectic style. Okay. With the European arch windows, Malay fan lights, and Chinese motif as decoration, depending on the whim of the owners. A special features of the shop houses is the provision of 5-foot way at the ground floor, which was always attributed to Stanford Raffles when he set foot on Malaya and Singapore during the early 19th centuries. Another type of housing were the Chinese New Village houses, built at the fringe of many towns and urban centers such as Kuala Lumpur, Ipoh, Malacca, Johor Bahru, during the emergency period in the 1950s under the BRICS plan, where mainly ethnic Chinese or sometimes the Aboriginal people are relocated to designated fence camp to cut them off from the influence of the Malayan Communist Party, forming the new villages that we can still see them in Salak South, Jinjang, Jenjarum, Macap Baru, Labis, Gombak, just to name a few. And similar to the Malay houses, these new houses, so-called new village houses, are mainly built in timber and sometimes half sand brick, half timber, covered with thatch roof or zinc roof. They were built to meet the basic housing need of people living in the rural areas. Instead of raised on the steel, they are mostly built directly on the ground, sometimes with or without cement floor. Now, another interesting type of housing worth noting is the clan jetty settlement found in Penang, which are timber houses built on steel off the coastline of Georgetown, Penang, where people of the same clan with the same family surname would stay together along the same jetty networks, giving the names to the jetties like Lim, Chew, Tan, Lee, Yo jetties. This clan jetty settlement showed the ingenious way the new settlers have adopted to settle themselves in urban center where there is no more land available on land to build legally. Other than the shop houses and townhouses, which are better regulated by the authority in terms of fire safety, hygiene, and sanitation, these houses tend to be built one by one as family cluster on ad hoc basis, as a human settlement evolved into kampongs or villages, or sometimes row by row along access road and riverines, instead of a planned systematic build, a massive housing estate that we call Daman today. Many of the kampongs and village houses then were built on land, and mind you, without a land title or land ownership. Okay, starting from the beginning about this housing. The local indigenous timber house, as exemplified by the traditional vernacular Malay houses, define the richest component of Malaysia cultural heritage. They were built to meet the basic housing needs of the people living in rural areas with a good understanding of the natural environment and tropical climate, utilization of traditional technology, and the resources readily available for construction. The most significant characteristics are the adaptation to the natural climate in Malaysia. The traditional Malay house is almost near to perfection due to its unique design, multifunctional use of space, building temperature control, and the flexibility of extending the house with the growing number of family members. That's the reason why today the style of the Malay vernacular architecture have inspired many young architects in designing Malaysia's contemporary houses that comprises the merits of the Malay vernacular and Western designs. Now, the dividing line is actually happening in the 1970s or 80s, when Malaysia sees rapid economic development, population increase, and rapid urbanization. Oh, by the way, you did not see the moving on of the slide, did you? Doctor?
Yeah, we can now we are on terrace houses.
Okay, you can see that.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I look at a small screen. It looked like it still stay at the very first slide. Okay, I just move on. Okay. So as the rapid rise of the urban development took place and major cities in Malaysia expanded due to the level of rural-urban migration increases, there was a huge demand for housing, especially in the urban centers and the suburb. The traditional timber house, old shop houses and townhouses can no longer cope. Slums and squatters emerged sporadically, posing political and public health and security problems. This have forced the government to look into providing public housing, especially in the urban center, in the form of affordable, low-cost, repetitive terrace houses and flats, and the opportunity for the private developer to offer more luxurious alternatives in the form of larger and better-looking terrace houses, semi-D, high-rise apartment, and condominiums. Okay, for terrace housing, a popular residential concept, terrace houses were booming in the 1970s, as mentioned. The origin of the terrace houses in Malaysia surprisingly can be traced back in the post-independent era of the late 50s and early 60s. It was actually originated from the Malacca townhouses dated back to the 17th centuries and the Chinese shop houses in the 19th centuries. The earliest type of townhouses or row houses were built in the 17th centuries during the Dutch occupation. And in the early 20th century, most urban dwellers were still occupying shop houses in the town areas. As rapid rise of urban development took place during the 80s, there were huge demand for housing and urban housing took on the form of single or double-story terrace houses. In fact, terrace houses become very popular to property developer as it offers quicker construction time at cheapest cost because of the batch construction method. And also it offers maximum efficiency in terms of the number of houses per unit area. Most importantly, perhaps, they proved to be a desirable upgrade from traditional kampong houses or even shop houses that most people were living in back then. And different from traditional houses, terrace houses were constructed systematically, linked in rows, sharing common bearing walls, and can be single or multi-story without much consideration for both climatic and cultural requirements as discussed. Terrace houses typically consist of 3 to 4 bedrooms, 2 to 3 toilets with lot size of 20 feet by 70 feet. That means each typical lot size is about 1,400 square feet. With the ground floor occupied by carporch, living room, dining room, a bedroom, kitchen, and a rear yard arranged in a straight line. The upper floors is normally occupied by 3 bedrooms and a small family hall in the middle. The concept of living in community or so-called kampong spirit in the past, as adopted by our Malaysian way, has therefore succumbed to the anonymous living of housing estate which still remain until today. In fact, it is one of the most prevalent housing type in Malaysia. Over the years, terrace housing has developed into one of the most successful residential concepts in Malaysia and has been recognized as primary form of housing for the middle income group and the affluent class. Today, terrace houses are designed in various form and layout, from small semi-compact starter houses to gated and guarded communities. Okay, as terrace house evolve over time, new type of housing start to appear. That includes the semi-D, the detached houses, and also cluster housing. Now, for semi-D, it actually existed side by side with the terrace houses during the beginning of the 1970s. A detached house, or sometimes incorrectly called a bungalow, is a freestanding house surrounded by open land on all 4 sides, typically with a lot size larger than 4,000 square feet. Whereas for a semi-D, on the other hand, are 2 houses sharing a common party walls with open lands on 3 sides, with lot size normally larger than 3,000 square feet. And since the late 1990s, changes in the purchasers' preference, socio-economic development, and also the scarcity of land available, all these have contributed to the evolution into other new types, as I mentioned earlier, that includes the cluster houses, townhouses, and zero lots. Okay, for the cluster houses, actually, they look like the semi-D from the front. but it's actually an evolution from a family with two pairs of family joining back to back. They share a common rear party wall, therefore doing away with the rear garden. By doing so, the developer managed to increase the density of the housing development with the luxury of a family. Whereas for the zero lot, that is in fact rows of family with one of its side wall pushed to one of the side boundary, therefore creating an illusion of rows and rows of bungalows or detached houses, as they do not share any common party walls. Each of the house enjoy a minimum 20 feet wide side gardens. However, unlike the detached houses, the side wall shall not have any windows, as it's actually overlooking to the garden of the other unit. So by doing that, the developer has actually transformed the so-called typical semi development to look more like a luxurious looking detached housing development. But in legal term, they are still considered as semi. Now, lastly, the townhouses. Purely looking at the facade of townhouses, they look like normal terrace housing. But they're actually rows of two or more units of houses stacked on top of one another, sharing the structure, external wall, open land, and car park lots on the ground level, with the roof of the lower units becoming the floor of the upper units. So what you really see, in fact, is they're actually separate houses stacking on top of each other. So they don't belong to the same owner. They are not considered as the same ownership. By doing so, the developer actually has doubled the number of housing units on the same plot of land. But because they have the sharing nature, they can only be strata title development, with each of the house unit considered as separate parcel of the overall block. Okay. So they are not considered as independent landed housing, rather they are sharing. Because of the nature of sharing, you have no liberty to change anything outside of your house. You cannot change the facade, you cannot change the staircase, you cannot change the color. You will have to consult your so-called management corporation, a body that formed together with all the house owner in order to get a permission to make any physical change to your external facade. So landed houses normally are open and free entry. Landed housing normally they are open for free entry and exist at all time, as what we see all the time. Due to the increase of the crime rate, the gated and guarded community scheme are getting more popular these days. And the number of gated and guarded communities in Malaysia has been on the rise over the years. In fact, the normal landed housing communities are legally not allowed to fence up, and no guard is allowed to check the entry and exit of any visitors. And this always has been a contention point for all the residents, because they argue, who are you giving me who have the power to stop me from entering? Who has the power to set up a guard house at the entry point to check my entry or check my personal identity? So that become a headache. But anyway, because of the situation that we have, because of the crime rate that is on the rise, the government has given some leniency to all this landed housing to implement this system. But as mentioned, legally, there's no binding power to force all residents to subscribe to this kind of scheme. Okay, as we move forward, there's another new form of landed housing in the form of strata title housing that start to begin in year 2000, offering common facilities such as swimming pool, clubhouse, lush green parks within the development for the lifestyle living that a normal non-strata landed housing development do not offer. The examples are Desert Park City, Kepong, launched in 2000, and Setia Eco Cascadia in JB, launched in 2011. They are actually a kind of a condominium development, just that you do not see any high-rise apartment, but you see rows and rows of landed housing with the same luxury of condominium living. So similar to a condominium or luxurious apartment, they are guarded, gated, often invokes images of exclusivity as well as wealth. No? And just like the condominium, this house owner do not have the liberty to alter the external look of the house due to the house rule, thereby ensuring the consistency of the overall architecture appearance of the development. So in other words, nobody has the liberty to change the overall ambience of the entire development. They will probably stay as it is until someone come up to the management corporation and obtaining the so-called right to make changes. So many potential house buyers who are impressed by this kind of beautiful landscape, richly serve kind of a common facility available, and then of course the steady design fence and entrance gate. They are all caught unaware that they are buying such a strata title landed housing development with all the restriction that house rules has imposed on them. And beside that, they have to pay very high maintenance fee that normal landed house owner do not pay. So beware of that. So this slide shows Setia Eco Castadia with the beautiful landscape and very consistently maintained facade, as well as a rear garden available. So they give you a very, very comfortable, very, very upmarket, so-called luxurious living environment. But beware, you are actually buying something like a condominium, and all the so-called responsibility and as well as the duty will be an onus on you. Moving on, high-rise residential or vertical living has become a trend of living style among the urban professional community in Malaysia. The concept of high-rise living is not new in the country. One of the very first few high-rise residential has been introduced in Penang, which is known as a rifle range, and that is in fact a low-cost flat development. The very first luxurious high-rise development is in fact Desa Kudelari, a 30-year-old condominium located in Ampang, KL, completed in 1984. And at the turn of the century, high-rise residential development began to spring up in major urban centers like Penang, KL, Johor Bahru, and this is mainly due to the increase in demand for housing and the scarcity of land for development of the landed residential property. So facility seems to be a major draw in all these kind of high-rise residential building. And as a trend now is moving towards lifestyle living, house buyers do not merely buy a house now, but they want a home with complete housing amenities. Unlike before, where home was just a place to meet or to be with the family, house buyers now want their homes to be a reflection of their lifestyle through all kind of facility that their living community or township can offer, such as a higher tier of security and better privacy, full range of sport facilities, swimming pool, sauna and spa and whatnot. So this upsurge of lifestyle housing demand has urged the property developer offer more attractive and innovative products to meet the house buyers' demand. Therefore, many types of high-rise residential building in the limelight, range from large apartment to luxurious condominium, and even branded residences are offered by the property developer in the recent year. So there are a few good examples like those in KLCC, Mont Kiara, Ampang, and Bangsar. So this slide shows the kind of lifestyle that the developer has portrayed and attract all the buyers. With sky swimming pool, sky garden, nice landscape, so-called ageless pool, as well as hotel-like kind of lobby. Okay. Now, adding to the complexity and sophistication would be the emergence of something we call it service apartment. Okay. And they often come with a very fanciful name like Soho, Sovo, Sofo, or whatnot, you can call it, right? And officially, these are actually umbrella term for a type of hotel-style furnished apartment available for short-term or long-term stay, which provides amenity, housekeeping, and a range of services for guests to stay and conduct business, where most taxes and utilities are already included within the rental prices. So in other words, rightfully, service apartments shall be treated like hotel for you to stay for a certain period of time, but they are expanded a bit because they offer facilities much like traditional hotel, but with added space, convenience, and privacy like home, so we can enjoy living like a local when traveling. So they have private cooking facility, a kitchenette, full-size kitchen, sometimes equipped with dishwasher, washing machine, and so on and so forth. They also come with gyms, restaurant, meeting places, concierge, and all kind of hotel-like kind of facilities. But however, the term service apartment has been cleverly used by our developer on their high-rise apartment development on the lands with commercial title instead of residential title. So be mindful, for residential title, you are allowed to develop condominium and apartments. But in commercial land, you are not supposed to do that. You are not allowed to do it. So instead, when you have a piece of commercial land, the best you can do is the so-called service apartment, which in a way misnomer, no? Because in context, whatever you call it, it is simply a stratified freehold or leasehold residential unit built on commercial land. So many people view this kind of project as very popular property type, and that is even very popular and second to the so-called double-story terrace houses or condominiums. What ensue or what come after that would be a lot of story of disgruntled home buyer. When they bought these houses, they discover that after moving in, they have to pay high utility charges and maintenance fee. Why? Because these are built on commercial land title, and therefore they have to they are expected to pay all kind of a commercial rate, your water bill, your electricity bill, your phone bill, or whatever. So since these property are on commercial land, owners will have to pay all this, and not to mention quick rent and assessment charges, So they also might have to fork out higher money maintenance fee. So in all, be aware, when you chance upon a beautifully designed so-called service apartment, do check out the land title. If they are commercial title, then you are expected to pay all this and you have no chance to make any complaint. Now, the trial to modernization of Malaysia housing give a significant implication to urban planning. in Klang Valley, the new township development concept started in Petaling Jaya in the 1950s as the satellite town to Kuala Lumpur. During pre-independence period, it was addressed to relieve the concentration of population resulting from economic recovery after the World War, and to resolve the problem of unauthorized squatters that have grown rapidly in Kuala Lumpur. In making the living in cities as a preferred choice, more recreational areas like parks, open spaces, as well as public amenities such as hospital, school, libraries have to be provided and built. Urban planning should be made for the community needs at the right time and in the right place. However, all the new townships being developed today are often not located in most sought-after locations for the property buyers. But as urbanization gains pace, this township will eventually become self-sustaining if they are well planned for sustainability. Some of the very first master plan townships in one distant part of Klang Valley have become home to many family and properties and have seen their value grow over time to the delights of the initial buyer. So at the beginning, they will think that some new township like Setia Alam are too far flung away from Kuala Lumpur City. But nowadays, they become the popular choice for many new buyers. Why? Because of the self-sustained kind of planning facility they have. You have whatever you want right in the city alarm itself. You don't have to come out to the town to get all the necessity that once you have to do so. So the so-called the old mantra of location, location, location is still work, but the location choice are no longer just based on its address, but accessibility, highway, MRT, LRT, whatnot, and whether the residents can easily access to major highway expressway that could connect them to other places. So in this instance, good infrastructure, vibrant business activities, wide range of community amenities, and well-planned recreational facilities are all key components of a successful integrated township and are the factors that house buyer would consider before purchasing a house. This includes the actual floor area of living space, good location, and accessibility to employment, a neighborhood environment, a diverse collection of services including schools, clinic, retail, sense of belonging to a community of residents, and so on. Hence, property developer now play a very key role in the country's urbanization process, and they will need to become more innovative about how they plan, build, and manage their development in order to achieve a sustainable urban township. It is like building a city within a city. It allows the developer to take a holistic approach in planning a self-sustaining township with lifestyle element and variety of offering that could attract different group of buyers. So as I mentioned, a good example will be Setia Ipoh Hill, Semenge, LBS Alam Perdana, Bandar Puncak Alam, and the one that I mentioned before, Setia Alam. Now, the way forward. In tandem with the intensity of urbanization elsewhere, the rise in the purchasing power and growing demand for better urban living, the house buyer today are looking for additional facility in housing to meet their needs. Besides that, the affluent and modern society now also prefer development projects that revolve around a comprehensive master plan with convenience in mind that all major components like living, learning, working, playing can all be reached within their doorstep. The house buyer are also more environmentally conscious nowadays and start to pay greater emphasis and priority to sustainability and eco-friendly housing features than before. And with the still unyielding COVID-19 pandemic, the conception of social distancing and the emergence of the working from home idea has forced us to reconsider the way we live and build in the future. One of the most successful master plan development for urban living is Sunway Velocity by Sunway Property. The success of Sunway Velocity attributes to its strategic and vibrant location, excellent accessibility to public transportation such as MRT and shuttle buses, and integrated component which include shopping mall, retail shops, office suites, healthcare center, and service apartment. Also part of the master plan is the inclusion of a theme park, environmental deck, and covered pedestrian link bridges that connects the entire development with convenience in mind. So putting all these components together, practically the development mimics the functionality of a future city on its own. And with the popularity of the concept of sustainable living, people are also looking into housing design that has the least possible negative impact on our environment. This means energy efficiency, avoiding environmental toxins, using materials and resources in a responsible manner, while having a positive physical and psychological impact on its inhabitants. Building with sustainability in mind should be standard for the 21st century home. So what I have listed down now is all the so-called elements that will contribute or become a part of the element or ingredient for a sustainable housing. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic has forced us to reconsider the way we live and build in the future. From the conception of social distancing, new ideas are swiftly being brought to the fore, and people are confined within their homes now more than ever. A spotlight has been cast upon the way residences can accommodate the demand of this new unforeseen era. As homes begin to play greater roles in our daily lives, they will need to adopt or adapt in order to entertain more activities and services. So home will need to accommodate a greater amount of services and functions. Designated spaces for a greater number of specific activities such as reading, napping, physical activities, and entertainment will be desirable. The act of simply going for a walk or sitting in a park has become a monumental source of pride, but this become almost a luxury because of lockdown. So again, the architect will have to come up with their creativity. The demand for home designer will have to provide private outdoor spaces so every type of home looks like as if they are working in a park. Architects have to work out how to integrate the outdoor into even the most compact of homes, experimenting with roof garden, micro backyards, porches, and balconies. People may also seek a closer connection between their living space and the natural world, with folding glass door merging these two different zones. So with people forced to work from home, many dining room or dining table have become makeshift home offices. If all this come into fruition, there will be a rise in the need for functional private offices to be an integral part of the home. Some have even conceptualized ways to integrate home office into private outdoor spaces. A workplace designed into the front garden or a residence, for instance, will allow one to feel like they are not leaving their house to work. And with people more inclined to stay at home, the significance of kitchen within home has risen as well. Smart kitchen design will be more prominent, especially due to the rise of hands-free mindset. This means more voice-activated technology in the kitchen, controlling things such as light, faucets, and appliances. And also, not to mention, people may begin to pay more attention to their air quality within the home by limiting the amount of unfiltered outside air that comes in. Therefore, we may see a rise in the air purification system incorporated, which will take in the outside air, recondition it, and supply it as fresh air to a building. Now, there are endless possibilities the housing development can evolve beside what we have discussed just now. But due to the time limit, we have to leave it to the future discussion if we have the opportunity again. So with this, I would like to end my presentation and I'm open to the floor for discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Architect Chok. So
Thank you.
I think I have two questions here. Now we
Sure,
go into the Q&A session. I have two questions
sure.
here sent to me privately. I
Mhm.
think the person forgot to make it for everyone. So the
Right.
question number one is what are the major differences between service apartment and condominium? What are the clear indications between these two typologies?
Okay. All right. Now, condominium is built on land, so-called residential land title, on a piece of land holding a land title called residential, whereas service apartment are built on commercial land. So that these two are the major difference. Other than that, they all look almost the same. Besides that, in terms of payment, for those because they are staying in service apartment, which is on the commercial land title, they are paying a higher utility rate than those who are staying in a condominium. So you see the difference?
Okay,
You get the difference?
I hope that answered the question.
So the importance is a land title.
Mhm.
Land title. The land title will define what you can do. So I have told many people, in fact, Malaysia have a very peculiar way of, or rather the developer of the Malaysian developer are very ingenious. They know how to get around with certain constraint imposed. For instance, nowadays it's very difficult to find another so-called land, another piece of land with residential title in it. So they cannot find sufficient land for building condominium. So instead, there were many land that has the commercial land title. So in order to ensure the sustainability of their business, they will be able to build so-called service apartment on commercial title. Therefore, they beat the control that imposed by the Planning Act. You see the difference? Another issue is for residential land title, you are controlled by density. What does it mean by density? Is there is a control of the number of units you can build on a piece of land. For instance, for an acre, you probably can build 40 units of apartments or condominium. Or some you can appeal to 60 or 80s. But for commercial land, you don't have to comply with this. Rather, you are only bound by plot ratio. You're bound by plot ratio. So as long as the land offer you higher plot ratio, you can build up to the maximum of the plot ratio. So thereby, you can, in terms of number of houses, for instance, for a land with 1 acre, or rather 2 acres, for instance, you can probably build 120 condominiums, okay? But for a commercial land title of the same size, 2 acres, if your plot ratio is 3, That means you can build, okay, for 1 acre is equivalent to about 40,000 square feet, right? So 2 acre is 80,000 square feet. If your land is entitled to build with production of 3, so you can multiply 3 to the so-called 80,000 square feet of build up, right? You get what I mean? So 3 times 8, you get 24, 240,000. Am I right? 24,000? 240,000 square feet of build up. 240,000 of square feet of build up is a big build up. Imagine each house you build is in the region of, say, 1,000 square feet. So you can build 200 plus of houses, you know. Am I right? So in terms of that, you can see the vast difference between this. And furthermore, for commercial land, there's no control of the size of the residence, the house that you can build. Because for condominium or flat or apartment, the minimum size you can do is 1,000 square feet. But for this commercial land title, a service apartment can come, the size of a service apartment can come down as small as 300. That I come across. It's like a studio. You know? So you cannot find any studio apartment in a condominium. You can try it out. You check it out. For all the land with condominium title, you cannot find any so-called studio apartment. But this is very popular among all the service apartment. So that is the difference.
Okay, thank you, Architect Chok. Actually, we got 2 more questions coming in. I just say like question number 2 lah. I just okay. For question number 2, what do you think about the future of our housing with the land getting more expensive, construction costs rising, and with everything on the rise? Can we see that our affordable housing is pushed towards the suburb area, especially for middle income earners and below, while the city area is being dominated by the top earners?
I think you already have the answer. Your answer self-answering. Surely, for so-called affordable housing, these are mainly the so-called role and responsibility of the government, right? So, as you know, the government has difficulty to obtain so-called a piece of land right in the town area as competitively as the housing developer. So in other words, they have no choice but to look a little bit far-flung from the urban center. And that's where you can find flats, you know, or not only flats, maybe the low-cost housing far away from the city center. Of course, the developer also, because of the obligation, they are obliged to build so-called affordable housing as well. But of course, dollar and cents matters. So no matter how, those so-called affordable housing that developer will build probably is in the range above 250,000 to 300,000. So that become the issue of affordability, you know, because even at that kind of price range, many people cannot afford that. Then coupled with most of the developer have a way to circumvent so-called control on this building, the requirement to build affordable housing. Most of the time they will swap, you know, with another piece of land. So they will bargain with the government and they'll get another piece of land, mostly outskirts, and they'll build those so-called affordable houses or low-cost houses there just to fulfill their obligation as a developer, right?
Okay, thank you, Architect Chok. I hope that answered the question, yeah? So the third question coming in is actually, what are the consequences if the owner makes some changes on their house for strata landed housing without the permission of JMB? And how the process to get approval to make renovation for the strata landed housing?
Good question. Now, if you are making any alteration within your house, within the shell, there's no problem. You can change anything within your own unit, as long as you do it closed door. But as long as you start touching anything outside, of course, you have no choice because you are only one of the so-called shareholder of the entire strata title development. So you will have to consult. So in other words, in order to so-called make alteration to the external look of the house, whether you add on a porch, whether you add on a swimming pool, whether you change your gate or so on, you have no choice to bring it up at the MC's meeting. Okay, I believe those who stay in the strata title development will understand what I mean. What do you mean by MC? Or JMB for the matter if there's no MC form yet. So they will have to so-called apply to the MC, probably with a proposal to get it approved by the MC. And only with the approval of the MC, then you can start submitting any plans for alteration to your house. Because the local authority will not accept any application for alteration to your house if it doesn't come with a so-called consent letter or approval letter from the MC. So it's a must. You have no choice.
Okay, thank you, Architect Chok. Okay, I think there's another question here. All right. Hi, Architect Chok. Can I build a bungalow in a cluster lot, building not connected with each other?
Well, yes and no. Because firstly, you will say yes, of course. Why not? If I have a piece of land, why is there a control that I must really build something that adjoining with my neighbor? Of course, you can say then what it means is that you want to do a lot of setback from your boundary, and by doing so, you are actually sacrificing your build up, and whether you want to do it or not, I'm not sure. You see, but again, because there is a so-called CAN, or rather kebenaran rancang, submitted prior to you occupying the house. So very high chances is when you want to make alteration from a cluster house to a so-called bungalow, you will have no choice to submit KM, you will have to obtain KM approval from the local authority before you can move on to submit building plan to realize this kind of act. So I don't know whether, firstly, you have to consider whether it's worth to do it because you are giving up your build up, in return to purposely do a freestanding house on a piece of land. Then secondly is you will have to go through the CAN process.
Okay. Thank you very much, Architect Chok, for the answer. Is there any more question? Guys, is there any more question? I think we still have time for Q&A. We still can accommodate like half an hour actually, because the time period for you to give lecture with including the Q&A session is actually around 2 hours. So is there any more question?
Hi,
Dr.
architecture.
Yeah.
Sure.
Hi, architecture. I'm Call.
Mr. Cole, yes. Good morning.
I just want to ask that okay, if for the rent title is the residential,
Sure.
but is allowed for the mixed development, then how about the commercial will definitely come in?
Again, so
Because
you
this
are,
is the like example. Okay, for example, the land is the residential, but
okay.
the authority allowed for the mixed development, then that why they want to join in the commercial come as a mixer.
Okay, I'm not sure to what extent the mix comes into the so-called residential title development. Are you talking about just a small little what do you call it, newsstand, uh, maybe kindergarten or something, or maybe a provisional, small little provisional shops that purely serving the the local. What I mean is like condominium. In a condominium, you'll find uh, all these kind of small little amenities or commercial amenities available, but it is not big enough to become a commercial development by itself, like shop houses and all this. So, are you talking about this? Because I have no experience
No,
doing
uh,
something like you
because
mentioned.
actually is like is if for the okay I will just open to say that it's like example for the Penang Authority. If
Yes.
you are doing the mixed development, they will
Mhm.
allow you 20% for your land area.
Mm.
It means that okay, example your land is a 1 acre, so you
Mm.
can allow for the build the mixed development. So for
Oh.
the Penang,
Mm. So you're talking about like
so for the
township, lah, like a township, like a
yeah,
township, right?
like
Yeah, yeah, sure, sure.
like
That's
a
not an
mixed
issue.
development. Oh,
That's not an issue because if you are talking about township, uh, like for instance a taman or something like that, they will still allow you to do shops anyway. So in a way,
mm-hmm.
if you are talking about township, certain commercial component will still come in anyway. So it's not an issue.
Oh,
It's not an issue.
because that the land originally is the residential.
Yes, yes. So it is,
Yes, lah.
is it going to be a landed type of development, or is it going to be a high-rise development?
If for the Penang, normally it's mixed development is considered is the high rise.
High-rise, so they allow
Mm.
certain shops to be incorporated at the ground floor, you know. Am I right?
Yeah. Then
Mm,
and they
okay.
need to comply the
Mm.
affordable or the LMC together.
I see, I see. Probably there's certain relaxation there lah, in Penang because it's a urban
Mm-hmm.
area. They probably can foresee certain needs for some kind of mixed activities, or mixed mixing commercial to the
Mm-hmm.
residential component so that the commercial part can serve the local community. The idea, I believe, is
Mm-hmm.
only serving the local communities, not so much like a shopping center that is open to outsider. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
everyone can come in anyway, you know. There's no one can stop you
Mm-hmm.
from coming to my building, right?
Yeah.
So I
Okay.
believe
Thanks, Architect.
the situation that you mentioned is quite peculiar to Penang in an urban situation.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
yeah.
because that I know that Penang is there, but other state is different. They even
Yes.
though until the 80 units per acres, they also don't allow for the commercial to join in.
Yes. Yes. In fact, no places has allowed this, and you have
uh,
mentioned a very first example. Yes.
uh,
Okay. Yeah. All
okay.
right. Thanks a
Thanks,
lot, Mr.
architect.
Cole.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for the question, Shane. Call. All right, any more question coming in? We still
I
have
have a
time.
I have a question, Doctor.
Yeah.
I was wondering, because housing has been a very popular topic among
Mm-hmm.
students. I'm not sure whether it's still popular now, but in my time, housing has always been a very popular topic because maybe it has some connection to social, cultural issues.
Mm-hmm.
That's why a lot of students actually choose housing, whether high rise or low rise, as their topic. So I don't know in the school nowadays, is there any so-called uh, development or rather research by student looking into this so-called the future of our housing?
Okay, Mrs. Chow. About the future, not so much lah. But the funny thing is, the question that you asked whether our school actually try to accommodate about this social culture and housing,
Yes.
it's actually the thing that we are doing now.
Right.
Actually, the I think the master Master Arch Pesisir, this one. We are actually for this semester we are doing this social culture and housing. So basically, we have these 3 panels, and each of the
Right.
panel has their own way of doing it. Especially the housing lah.
Mm.
But we are actually doing it. We
Okay.
have to tackle the social culture, and then of course we have to do some research lah.
Yeah.
But then the research is not exactly look into the future, but then we are looking into the current issues, the current
Okay.
social issues that we have nowadays. So that we
Right.
did some research. The student have to do some research about it, and then from the research, we translate, we transfer all that information into the housing design basically. So
See.
that's what we are doing this semester lah. And that is why most of our lecture inputs are consisting of housing. Consisting of housing. I think we have like our previous lecture all actually related to the housing, and of course some research a bit lah. And then tomorrow also we're going to have some lecture about this housing economics. So
All
we
right,
look
that's good.
into the economic perspective
Yeah.
for the housing.
In fact, housing economics is something Malaysian have to look at because
Yeah.
if you look around, there's so many vacant houses, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's so many vacant houses. Whether you look at the whether they are luxurious type or even those so-called what affordable type.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of houses empty around here. So ranging from those 250,000 all the way up to those that is millions, you know. So, and in fact, before when I'm doing this topic, I have done some browsing through the internet, and I realized they mentioned, in fact, the most so-called vacant those houses that are not taken are mainly those ranging between 250 to 500,000, surprisingly. So the reason, of course, one of the reason is because the location. They are mostly located somewhere a little bit further away from their workplace, or further away from the convenience of the urban center. Then another reason is because of the financing. The financing. So it looks like, according to research, the so-called breaking point is in fact 280,000. 280,000. This is a breaking point where people can so-called Malaysian average in average can afford because they cannot get any so-called loan for purchasing these kind of houses. But it's not possible actually to ask the bank to relax their rules and regulation on loaning to you. So the only other way we can look at is perhaps how to cut down the cost. You know, cost in terms of land cost, in terms of construction cost. So maybe I'm not sure the school can look at that, doing some kind of research, looking at the material, looking at the layout, looking at the so-called master planning. Because in one hand, you want to fit in as many houses as possible in order for the scale of economy. But at the same time, how can you bring back our kampong spirit to our so-called living places? But now you look at all the places, all the taman, there's no kampong spirit because purely the way that they do the layout is not conducive for doing so. You look at the kampong, most houses are not so-called fence up, and most houses are actually gather together in the form of cluster rather than a row. You know? So how shall we do that kind of clustering at the same time uh, achieving that kind of economic scale? That's how we do it. And second thing is what kind of material that we should look at to cut down the cost so that you can make the house very affordable, so to speak.
So, Architect Chok, can we see that the more appropriate number for affordable housing is actually around 300,000?
Yes and no, because there are still
Uh-huh.
other people below, their income is below this line. There are
Mhm.
still other people who have this. Because you remember, the bank will look at your salary, net, net meaning minus all the kind of so-called financial financial burdens. Only the net one, and from there you are only to touch 30%. So unless your combined income can be in the region of say maybe 8,000, only then you can start looking at the houses that is above 300,000. So
See.
in a way, that is very, very, very tough, very, very tough. So that's why the so-called 150,000 houses is still the so-called variable price for a lot of people.
Okay, because I think some of the students in my panel actually doing this affordable housing in a very expensive land, very expensive location. So I think it's a challenge for them. It's a challenge for
Yes.
them.
Yeah. Well, if the government is powerful enough,
Mm.
if they can exercise the right to acquire those land, of course, it's a very tough, very, very tough job for government to do that. Because whoever want to let go their land, if they're high value in it. So I'm not sure. You probably have touched a lot of reserve, the reserve here and there, and looking at it creatively, maybe certain river reserve, certain rail reserve, and start looking at releasing all this so-called reserve for building houses in the urban center. In fact, I have come across some proposal, but that was way back in the 70s or 80s. Some A student has proposed some kind of housing, public housing along the rail line, and some along the river line. So that is a possible way, because otherwise, how are you going to steal a piece of land from a town? No way. There's no way. No one is going to let go any piece of land, right?
Mhm. Okay.
Maybe even you can build below the highway. I don't know, but whether you can bear with all the kind of noise and disturbance or not, that's another matter.
Building it below the highway
Yes.
looks like a stingan, something like that. Right?
But I do see some happening in Europe and
Mm.
also in Tokyo. But I wonder they are considered affordable or not affordable. I'm not sure. They look proper. They look really proper.
Okay. All right. So, is there any more question? This is a chance for you to have a Q&A with Architect Chok. So I was hoping that we have more questions, but if we don't, then I think we shall end the session. Because we still have
Yes.
times like until 11, we still have about 10 more minutes. But then if we don't have any more question, then I think we can end the session early lah. Okay. So I think it's a
Right.
very informative lecture, very fruitful discussion by Architect Chok, and I was hoping that this is not going to be our last meeting.
Sure.
Okay, I'm hoping that we can still see each other, and maybe we can provide some sort of ideas or suggestion to the students, especially to ETM students.
Certainly,
So
certainly.
yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Architect
You're
Chok,
welcome.
and I think that I shall end the session, and the students may go to their respective panel. I don't know whether they have a session after this with their panels.
Mhm.
But then for the lecture input this morning, I'm going to end it with thank you very much
You're
to
welcome.
Architect Chok, and thank you to the students for participating in this lecture
Thank you
input.
so much. Hope to
All
see you
right.
again.
Yes,
Bye.
Mr. Chok. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. See
Thank
you
you.
all.
Bye. See
All
you.
right.